Not every childhood wound leaves a bruise that people can see. Some of the deepest scars are completely invisible, quietly shaping the way a person thinks, feels, loves, and even sees themselves for decades. Psychology has uncovered a surprising truth that many people overlook. A child does not always need to experience harsh punishment or obvious abuse to carry emotional pain into adulthood. Sometimes the greatest damage comes from silence, from moments when no one listened, from feelings that were dismissed, from needs that went unnoticed again and again until the child slowly stopped expressing them altogether. The frightening part is that this process happens so gradually that neither the child nor the parent realizes what is being created. Years later, that same child may become an adult who constantly doubts themselves, fears rejection, apologizes for everything, struggles to trust others, or spends their entire life trying to earn love they should have received freely. Most people never connect these patterns to the simple experience of feeling emotionally unseen during childhood. Being ignored as a child does not always mean being left alone in an empty house or growing up without parents. Emotional neglect is much quieter than that. A child can grow up in a home with food on the table, clean clothes, birthday celebrations, and parents who work hard every day, yet still feel completely invisible on the inside. Emotional neglect happens when a child's feelings, fears, excitement, sadness, or emotional needs are repeatedly overlooked, minimized, or treated as unimportant. It is not always intentional. In many families, parents genuinely love their children, but are overwhelmed by work, financial stress, personal struggles, or simply repeat the parenting they experience themselves. They provide everything needed for survival, yet unknowingly miss what is needed for emotional growth. Over time, the child's brain begins adapting to this absence of emotional connection in ways that can last for decades. Modern psychology continues to reveal that emotional neglect affects far more than childhood happiness. It influences brain development, stress responses, relationships, confidence, decision-making, and even physical health later in life. Many adults spend years trying to fix anxiety, loneliness, perfectionism, or people-pleasing, without realizing these behaviors may have started long before they could even understand what emotions were. Hidden beneath many adult struggles is a child who silently learned that their feelings did not matter enough to be noticed. This hidden lesson often becomes the voice inside their head for the rest of their life unless they recognize where it came from. In this video, we will uncover the psychology behind the ignored child and explore how emotional neglect quietly shapes personality, self-worth, relationships, and the way the brain responds to the world. You will learn why ignored children often become highly sensitive to other people's emotions, why they struggle to recognize their own needs, why rejection feels unusually painful, and why success alone rarely heals these invisible wounds. We will also uncover several lesser-known psychological facts that many people never hear about, along with the surprising ways the brain adapts in order to survive emotional loneliness. Most importantly, we will explore whether these deeply rooted patterns can actually change and what science says about healing from childhood emotional neglect. By the end of this video, you may recognize connections that explain parts of yourself or someone close to you in a completely different way. So stay with us until the very end, because the final insights may completely change how you understand childhood, adulthood, and emotional healing. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy exploring the hidden psychology behind human behavior and want more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and join us for the journey ahead. Every child enters the world with one powerful instinct that exists long before they learn to speak, read, or understand complicated emotions. They naturally search for connection. A baby cries because they need comfort. A toddler runs toward a parent after falling because they need reassurance. A young child excitedly shares a drawing, a story, or a small achievement because they want someone to notice. These moments may seem ordinary, but they are doing something extraordinary inside the developing brain. Every warm response tells the child, your feelings matter, your experiences matter, you matter. This is how emotional security begins. Children are not simply asking for attention because they are needy. They are asking because attention is one of the ways the brain learns whether the world is safe. Healthy emotional connection teaches children that expressing joy, fear, sadness, or frustration is normal. They learn that emotions can be shared instead of hidden. They also learn that difficult feelings eventually pass because someone helps them carry the emotional weight. But this process changes when emotional responses are repeatedly missing. Instead of being comforted, the child may hear that they are too sensitive. Instead of being listened to, they may be ignored because the adults are busy, tired, or emotionally unavailable. Instead of receiving understanding, they may receive silence. At first, the child keeps trying. They cry louder, they speak more often, they seek more reassurance. But after enough disappointment, the brain begins to notice a painful pattern. Expressing emotions does not bring comfort. It brings nothing at all. Slowly, the child starts changing their behavior. They cry less, not because they feel less pain, but because they stop expecting anyone to respond. They stop talking about their fears because no one seems interested. They hide sadness behind a smile because showing it has never changed anything. From the outside, this child may appear quiet, mature, or independent. Inside, however, an important psychological shift has already begun. The brain is remarkably adaptive. Its first priority is survival, not happiness. When emotional needs are ignored over long periods, the brain does not simply wait for things to improve. It adjusts. It begins treating emotional expression as something unnecessary or even risky. Scientists often describe the brain as constantly learning from repeated experiences. If reaching for comfort repeatedly leads to disappointment, the brain updates its expectations. It creates a shortcut that says, "Keep your feelings to yourself." Over time, this response becomes automatic. The child no longer consciously decides to hide emotions. Their nervous system starts doing it without effort. This is emotional suppression, and while it may protect the child from repeated disappointment in the short term, it often creates serious challenges later in life. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They remain active beneath the surface, influencing thoughts, behaviors, and even physical health. Many adults who grew up emotionally ignored struggle to explain what they feel because they spent years practicing not feeling anything openly at all. They may tell others they are fine while carrying overwhelming stress inside. They may become disconnected from their own emotions to such an extent that they recognize everyone else's feelings before recognizing their own. What once helped them survive childhood quietly follows them into adulthood. One of the least understood effects of emotional neglect is emotional invalidation becoming part of a person's identity. Children naturally believe the adults around them understand the world better than they do. Because of this, when parents repeatedly ignore or dismiss their emotions, children rarely conclude that the adults are wrong. Instead, they conclude that their own emotions must be wrong. If excitement is ignored, perhaps it was not worth sharing. If sadness is dismissed, perhaps sadness is a weakness. If fear receives criticism instead of comfort, perhaps fear should never be shown. These conclusions slowly become beliefs. They no longer question whether their emotions deserve attention, because they have already accepted that they do not. This process is called internalization. The messages children repeatedly receive from the outside eventually become the voice inside their own minds. Years later, no parent needs to dismiss them anymore, because they have learned to dismiss themselves. They minimize their achievements. They apologize for expressing discomfort. They hesitate before asking for help because they believe their problems are not important enough. This invisible habit explains why many adults continue treating themselves with the same emotional neglect they experienced as children. As emotional invalidation becomes normal, another powerful belief quietly develops beneath the surface. It is rarely spoken out loud, but it shapes countless decisions throughout life. The belief is simple: I am not important. Young children are not capable of understanding complicated adult problems. They do not know that a parent may be overwhelmed by work, struggling with depression, dealing with financial stress, or carrying unresolved childhood trauma. Instead, children explain events using the only information available to them. They assume everything is connected to themselves. If nobody listens, they believe they are not worth listening to. If their emotions receive little attention, they assume their emotions have little value. This way of thinking is not a flaw. It is a normal part of childhood development. Unfortunately, when emotional neglect continues, these explanations become permanent beliefs. Low self-worth is not born overnight. It grows slowly through hundreds of ordinary moments where a child feels invisible. Eventually, the child stops expecting to matter. They lower their expectations. They ask for less. They dream smaller dreams because disappointment feels familiar. Even success may feel uncomfortable because deep inside they still carry the belief that they are somehow less valuable than everyone else. This hidden belief rarely disappears with age. Instead, it quietly changes form. An adult may appear successful, responsible, and capable while secretly feeling like they never do enough. Compliments feel uncomfortable because they conflict with years of negative self-beliefs. Opportunities create anxiety instead of excitement because they fear being exposed as not good enough. Relationships become confusing because genuine care feels unfamiliar. Some people push others away before they can be rejected. Others accept poor treatment because they believe they deserve nothing better. The outside world sees confidence or competence, but beneath the surface lives a child who still wonders why they were never fully seen. Many adults spend years chasing achievements without realizing they are trying to solve an emotional problem that achievements cannot fix. This is also where people-pleasing often begins. It is commonly mistaken for kindness, generosity, or a naturally caring personality. But for many emotionally neglected children, it starts as a survival strategy. If simply being themselves did not bring love or attention, perhaps being useful will. Perhaps being perfect will. Perhaps making everyone happy will. The child slowly learns to monitor other people's needs before their own. They become helpful. They avoid conflict. They stay quiet. They agree even when they disagree. Every act is driven by the hope that approval might finally create the emotional connection they have been missing. Over time, pleasing others stops feeling like a choice. It becomes automatic. Saying yes feels safe because saying no carries the fear of losing acceptance. Setting boundaries creates guilt because boundaries risk disappointing someone. Even simple requests become difficult to refuse. Deep inside, the nervous system still remembers childhood lessons. Love often felt uncertain, so it had to be earned. Attention felt limited, so mistakes had to be avoided. Acceptance felt conditional, so everyone else's comfort became more important than personal needs. Many adults continue exhausting themselves trying to keep everyone around them happy, without understanding that this habit began decades earlier as a child's attempt to feel emotionally secure. As these patterns continue, another emotional burden quietly takes hold. Rejection starts feeling much bigger than it actually is. Emotional neglect teaches the brain to stay alert for signs of disconnection, because losing connection once meant emotional pain. This creates rejection sensitivity. A delayed text message suddenly feels personal. A friend speaking in a different tone feels like anger. A small disagreement feels like the beginning of abandonment. The logical part of the brain may understand that nothing serious has happened, but the emotional part reacts as though an old wound has been reopened. Conversations are replayed over and over in the mind. Tiny mistakes are analyzed as subs. Criticism, even when gentle, feels deeply personal because it touches beliefs that have existed since childhood. People who experienced emotional neglect often become experts at reading facial expressions, body language, voice changes, and subtle shifts in behavior. Their brains learn that noticing emotional changes early might help them avoid future pain. They constantly scan the emotional environment without realizing they are doing it. They notice tension before anyone else. They sense disappointment before it is spoken. They quickly adjust their own behavior to reduce conflict. While this ability may look like emotional intelligence, it is often rooted in survival rather than confidence. The child who once searched every room for signs of emotional safety eventually becomes the adult who notices everyone else's mood while quietly forgetting to ask one important question about themselves. How do I actually feel? As the ignored child grows older, one of the quietest but most powerful changes begins to shape their personality. They slowly lose the ability to recognize what they actually need. This does not happen because they are naturally selfless, or because they simply enjoy putting others first. It happens because their brain has spent years learning that other people's emotions deserve attention while their own emotions do not. During childhood, every relationship teaches an important lesson. If a child's feelings are welcomed, they learn to pay attention to their inner world. If their feelings are repeatedly ignored, they learn to look away from themselves and toward everyone else instead. This creates a habit that can last for decades. Before making even a small decision, they think about how it will affect others. Before expressing disappointment, they worry about making someone uncomfortable. Before asking for help, they convince themselves that someone else probably needs help more. Over time, they become experts at reading other people while becoming strangers to themselves. They can sense when a friend is upset, when a coworker is stressed, or when a family member is hiding sadness. Yet when someone asks them a simple question like, "What do you want?" they often pause because they honestly do not know. Their attention has been focused outward for so long that looking inward feels unfamiliar. This emotional disconnection becomes even more noticeable in adulthood. Emotions are meant to guide decisions. Happiness tells us what brings meaning. Anger tells us when a boundary has been crossed. Sadness reminds us that something important has been lost. Fear warns us about danger. But when emotions are ignored for years, these signals become difficult to hear. Many adults who experienced emotional neglect describe feeling emotionally numb or confused. They know something feels wrong, but they cannot explain exactly what it is. They struggle to identify whether they are tired, lonely, anxious, disappointed, or simply overwhelmed because they were never encouraged to explore these feelings in childhood. Instead of asking themselves what they truly need, they immediately begin solving everyone else's problems. Their own emotional world remains hidden beneath endless responsibilities and constant concern for others. This is why emotionally neglected adults often become the people everyone depends on, while quietly carrying burdens that nobody notices. They have learned that caring for others feels safer than caring for themselves. Losing touch with personal desires affects nearly every area of life. Career choices, friendships, romantic relationships, hobbies, and even daily routines may be shaped more by other people's expectations than by genuine personal interest. Some adults spend years working in careers they never wanted because they were trying to earn approval. Others stay in unhealthy relationships because leaving feels selfish. Even choosing a restaurant, a vacation destination, or a favorite activity becomes difficult because they have spent so much time adapting to everyone else's preferences. This is not indecisiveness in the usual sense. It is the result of years spent disconnecting from their own inner voice. The question, "What do you enjoy?" may seem simple, but for someone who grew up emotionally ignored, it can feel surprisingly difficult. They were taught without words that their preferences mattered less. As adults, they often continue living by that invisible rule without realizing it. This pattern naturally carries into relationships, where childhood experiences continue shaping emotional expectations. Psychologists often describe these expectations as attachment patterns. During childhood, the brain quietly studies every interaction with caregivers to answer one important question: are people emotionally safe? The answer becomes a blueprint for future relationships. When emotional needs are met consistently, children usually develop secure attachment. They grow up believing they are worthy of love and that other people can generally be trusted. But when emotional neglect becomes part of childhood, different attachment patterns often develop. These patterns are not personality flaws. They are survival strategies created by a young brain, trying to make sense of unpredictable emotional experiences. One common response is anxious attachment. Deep inside, the person fears losing emotional connection because they rarely felt secure while growing up. As adults, they may become deeply attached to partners, friends, or family members. They constantly seek reassurance that everything is okay. Small changes in communication feel alarming. A shorter text message, a delayed reply, or a slight change in tone can trigger intense worry. Their mind immediately searches for explanations, often assuming they have done something wrong. They may replay conversations for hours, looking for mistakes that probably never existed. This behavior is not caused by weakness. It is driven by a nervous system that learned long ago that emotional distance could mean emotional pain. Every relationship feels precious because losing it seems unbearable. Others develop the opposite response, known as avoidant attachment. Instead of chasing closeness, they avoid it. Somewhere during childhood, they learn that depending on others usually leads to disappointment. As a result, they become fiercely independent. They rarely ask for help. They keep emotional distance even from people they care about. They may enjoy relationships but become uncomfortable when emotional intimacy grows deeper. Vulnerability feels dangerous because trusting someone means risking another painful disappointment. These individuals often convince themselves they simply prefer being alone. Yet beneath that independence, there is often an old fear of emotional rejection. Their distance is not always a lack of love, it is protection. Interestingly, both anxious and avoidant attachment grow from the same emotional wound. One person responds by moving closer, the other responds by moving farther away. Both are trying to avoid the pain they experienced as children. This explains why relationships often become confusing for adults who experienced emotional neglect. They may desperately want closeness while simultaneously fearing it. They may struggle to trust genuine kindness because it feels unfamiliar. Compliments may create suspicion instead of comfort. Healthy love may even feel boring because chaos has become emotionally familiar. Without realizing it, many people repeat relationship patterns that mirror childhood, not because they want to suffer, but because the brain naturally returns to what feels familiar, even when that familiarity is painful. Many emotionally neglected adults believe that success will finally erase these feelings. They tell themselves that once they earn enough money, achieve an important goal, receive recognition, or build an impressive career, the emptiness inside will disappear. This belief creates a powerful drive toward achievement. Hard work becomes more than ambition. It becomes an attempt to prove personal worth. Success temporarily brings relief because praise and recognition provide the attention that once felt missing. But the relief rarely lasts. Soon another goal appears, another promotion, another achievement, another reason to keep proving themselves. The emotional hunger remains because achievement cannot replace the emotional security that was never fully developed during childhood. This is where perfectionism often begins. Perfectionism is not simply wanting to do well. It is believing mistakes make a person less worthy of love or respect. The emotionally neglected child learns that being perfect may increase the chances of receiving attention. As an adult, that lesson continues. They work harder than everyone else. They rarely feel satisfied with their accomplishments. Even after reaching goals that others admire, they immediately focus on what could have been better. Rest feels uncomfortable because productivity has become connected to self-worth. Compliments are dismissed because they never feel enough. Their inner critic speaks louder than any praise they receive from others. No achievement seems capable of filling the emotional space left by years of feeling unseen. The search for validation becomes endless because the real need was never external success. It was emotional connection. Validation from other people feels good, but only briefly. Soon the old doubts return. They question whether they truly deserve the praise. They wonder if people will eventually lose interest in them. They keep chasing bigger accomplishments, hoping the next one will finally bring lasting peace. Yet emotional wounds do not disappear simply because life looks successful from the outside. Many highly accomplished people quietly struggle with feelings of emptiness because their childhood taught them that love had to be earned rather than freely received. The hopeful truth is that the brain never completely loses its ability to change. One of the most remarkable discoveries in modern psychology and neuroscience is the idea of neuroplasticity. This simply means that the brain continues creating new pathways throughout life. It learns from repeated experiences, not only during childhood but also during adulthood. The same brain that adapted to emotional neglect can gradually adapt to emotional safety. This process takes time because old patterns were built over many years, but change remains possible. Every healthy emotional experience teaches the brain something new. Every moment of genuine acceptance challenges old beliefs. Every safe relationship provides evidence that the past does not have to control the future. Healing usually begins with emotional awareness. Before a person can change lifelong patterns, they first need to notice them. Instead of automatically ignoring emotions, they begin asking simple questions. What am I feeling right now? Why did that situation affect me so strongly? What do I actually need in this moment? At first, these questions may feel uncomfortable because they were rarely asked during childhood. But with practice, the connection between the mind and emotions slowly becomes stronger. Feelings stop becoming enemies that must be hidden, and instead become valuable sources of information. Healthy relationships also play an extraordinary role in healing. When someone consistently listens without judgment, respects boundaries, offers support during difficult moments, and remains emotionally present, the brain quietly begins updating its expectations. It slowly learns that not every relationship ends in disappointment.